I discovered that my husband faked his own death to cover up his depravity. Part 1. Kevin's story. I need to know if I am overreacting. This situation was already crazy. I'll give a quick TLDR, but it's an unbelievable story. I, Emily 35F, have been married to my husband Walt for 6 years. We have 2 kids, Paul 10M and Brian 5M. 11 years ago, when Walt and I were engaged, he went missing during a vacation trip to Thailand. He was missing for nearly 5 years, and told us all he had been in a Cambodian prison that whole time. I found out right after he left for the trip I was pregnant with Paul. I became extremely close with his family during this time. I also met and fell in love with a man named Kevin, who I was engaged to. When Walt returned, I found myself torn between picking up where we left off and continuing with Kevin. I chose to give Walt and I a chance. We got married a week later and I was pregnant with Brian in less than a year. I thought things had been fine in our relationship. We loved each other, and despite him being a workaholic, we were mostly happy. I have never been one to indulge myself with a professional massage. I like having my shoulders or feet rubbed by Walt. It's just to me a luxury expense and I haven't ever been willing to go. Walt's been a little bit more distant lately, and I have been feeling a little stressed with work. I have this coworker who has been pushing me, saying the place she goes is amazing. It doesn't matter who you get, they're all good, and to just go. I did just that. I walked in and asked if they had any availability. The guy at the desk said they did and took down some information. He said it would just be like 5 to 10 minutes. That's when I noticed the small bulletin behind the desk had 3 pictures from the security camera and a note above that said, "Permanent ban." I did a double take and swore that the one guy looks just like Walt. I'm staring at this picture when the front desk attendant asks if something's wrong. I tell him, "I think I know that guy in the picture. How do you get on a banned list?" He says, "Oh, it's our owner's policy if anyone asks for a happy ending." I was aghast at that moment. "People do that?" He replied, "Yeah, not very often, it's rare, but it does happen, and sadly it seems to always happen to the same person." He then apologized for oversharing, and I told him not to worry about it. He said Lisa was ready for me. She was standing at the entrance of the hall. She was a maybe 5 feet 1 inch and 110 pounds Asian American woman. I just had a feeling this was the massage therapist that always got these creeps. We went back and I enjoyed the massage with some light small talk. Her accent was totally Midwestern. This was a woman who grew up here, and probably several generations before had as well. I found out she had worked at this particular place for 3 years. As we finished, I couldn't help myself and I had to know, so I just came with the truth. This is very hard to say, but I noticed the list of banned guys. One of them is my husband. Were you by chance his massage therapist? She looked at me with genuine concerns as my eyes filled and said, "I had to be because all 3 guys were my clients. Which one was he?" I said, "The one in the orange shirt." She said, "Oh yes, I'm very sorry." I began to cry and said, "No, I'm sorry, I'm so embarrassed, and so sorry, I can't believe he did that to you." "Did he just outright ask?" She said, "This is going to be hard to hear, but you need to know the truth if that's your husband. I brought him into the room same as you and left while he got ready. When I knocked he said he was ready, but when I walked in he was laying face up, fully erect and holding some amount of cash. I immediately left the room and called for Jake, our front desk guy. He escorted the man out. I wanted to throw up. I composed myself and apologized again. I ended giving her like a $100 tip. I went straight home and began prepping to leave. Then this sudden wave of calm hit me, and I realized I needed to know how far this went. I did my best to play normal. When he finally got home from work, I just treated it like a normal night. When he went to bed, I used the opportunity to go through his phone. Texts were clean, no Snapchat, WhatsApp, etc. I clicked on his Reddit. There were his 4 posts from when he came back home from his imprisonment. I had seen these before. I was about to give up when I noticed I could switch between accounts. I was disgusted by what I found. He was joined to all Asian women fetish subs and massage subs. The chats were worse. As I read through them, most were just faceless women, probably men pretending actually, that he was sexting with. But there was one that he was definitely seeing. There were details of meetups, and how much he would pay. What he wanted her to wear or do. He was paying a sex worker for happy ending massages. He kept referring to her as Sok. A quick Google search told me this was a common Cambodian name. Probably wasn't really her name, but he was paying for the fantasy. There was another conversation on there, which as I read seemed very familiar. That's when I realized it was Jorge on the other end. They were both covering for each other for years through various affairs. As I scrolled through their long conversation history, I came across the most knife-twisting part. They had been just talking bullshit like any other time, and Walt was telling him about his upcoming appointment. Jorge says, "I bet you wish you could have just stayed in Cambodia, not have to do all this shit?" Walt replies, "Fuck yeah, but what are you gonna do? I got deported." Jorge follows, "Well, you were cheating on her too. I'm surprised she didn't turn you in the first time she caught you." Walt, "Yes, she was still holding out hope until the second time. It was all fake. It was lies. He was never in prison. He left me. I slept on the couch that night and told him I just fell asleep out there. The next day I asked Jorge to come meet me on the pretense of needing help with something. When he arrived I showed him the evidence I had of his affair, and told him it was going to his whole family if he didn't tell me the whole truth right now. Jorge laid it all out to me. Walt has been obsessed with Asian porn since high school. Notably happy ending massage fantasy. When we started together it was because I had the right optics. Jorge said Walt does love me as his wife, he just has this addiction. I told him to stop with that shit, and let me know about Cambodia. Prior to his trip, Walt had been engaging in an online affair with a Cambodian woman for 2 years. That means it started after we were together. Our bachelor trip was his chance to meet up with her in person. What I didn't know is he had gotten his passport and visas for both Thailand and Cambodia. Jorge didn't want to go to Cambodia, and Walt had only ever mentioned a desire to visit Thailand, so that became their cover. They arrived the first morning and took a week's worth of selfies together around the resort. At that point Walt left and went to meet this woman in Cambodia. He was there for 3 days with her, when he decided he was in love. She was from a well-enough-off family. He wanted more. So he and Jorge concocted his disappearance. At first he was only going to stay for the first 30 days then show back up. But when it was done he got his visa extended another 30 days. He couldn't extend it past that, so he just didn't. He hid there with her. However, being the shitty person he is, he began cheating on her as well. She caught him and kept him around because he was telling her he would help her immigrate to the States as his wife. After 4.5 years she caught him again, and not only dumped him but reported him, and he got deported. He had to come clean to his parents, who I had grown close to. They feared losing contact with their grandson and chose to hide all of this from me. Which was a betrayal so hard to hear after being in each other's lives for so long. They also told Walt to leave me alone, but at the same time wanted him to have a relationship with our son. WTF, I don't know how they thought those two things wouldn't conflict. He ignored that and made the effort to rekindle our relationship. When he had won, his dad made him marry me right away and told him to stop all of his terrible behaviors. He was hoping this would straighten Walt out now that he had his fun. Instead, all that happened was I threw away the best guy in the world for a workaholic porn addict with a creepy fetish. I feel so stupid. I headed home. I knew Jorge would inform Walt. I went ahead and sent Jorge's whole family the evidence of his infidelity. I then sent Walt's out to everyone I knew as well. By time Walt came home, which was way earlier than he ever had, he was fuming and getting bombarded with messages. I already had my car loaded with mine and kids' things. My best friend had taken the kids earlier. Walt came at me with attitude and I was ready to fight. He switched approaches and I tried to gaslight me and explain. I wasn't having it. I told him I knew about everything, Cambodia, the porn, the sex worker. He told me she's not a sex worker, just a college student in need of extra money. I screamed back at him. That's fucking worse. Now you're just taking advantage of a young girl in need. He suddenly shut up after that, and I told him he could expect divorce papers and nothing else. Then I left. It's been a few weeks. I feel like an idiot for not figuring this out. I'm starting to notice the signs I overlooked and that I was keeping myself blind to them. The long hours at work even though we don't need it, the starting of his own bank account from our joint account, the fact he signs up or agrees to every business trip or conference. It was just his way of feeding his depravity. The worst part is he came back for me. He could have came back and left me alone. I could have married Kevin, and now knowing what I gave him up for, I hate myself even more. Now, where I am getting some push that I'm overreacting. I am pushing for 100% custody and no visitation for him in the interim. I have evidence of porn addiction, work addiction, and visiting sex workers. I am also going 100% no contact with his parents. A few people, not many, are saying I should not try to cut the father and grandparents out of my kids' lives. I however disagree and feel Walt is a danger to them given his self-destructive and manipulative behavior. His parents will only get the time he gets, and at this point, I'm at best offering weekly supervised visits. Otherwise they are not to be in my life to any degree. What do you all think? Is this too much? Should I let them be in my kids' lives? He is a good father when he's there, and they are great grandparents, but I can't get over the fact it's all built on lies and manipulation.